Today we stand once more on the coastline of Ironreach, where there are some debts that cannot be measured in coin. The Salt Wife learned this too late. She believed the sea could be reasoned with. She was wrong.
The storm had worried the coast all night with the kind of force that Ironreach knew too well. Wave after wave struck the harbour until ropes hissed, masts knocked, and the hulls beneath them complained in creaks. When morning came, the sky itself was rusted, and the town rose and returned to work. On the shingle beyond the quay, a woman walked alone with her hood up. Her oilskins were stained by years of spray, and her boots were patched and worn. She carried a knife at her belt, not entirely for show, and she moved along pebbles that knew her tread. She never carried a sack so early, preferring first to walk and watch until she was sure the tide was finished with its daily game of hide and seek. Ironreach folk did not use her name. They called her the Salt Wife when they wanted to sound harmless, and that sea witch when they wanted to be cruel and hide their unease. Men said it into tankards, pretending it was only talk, but women said it more venomously when children or coin went missing. The harbour took what it took, and the town needed someone to blame who was still alive to hear it. She never corrected them. The tide was far out, and long strips of kelp lay like torn banners across the stones. A broken oar jutted into the grey light, and a cask hoop glinted between the weeds. Somewhere further along the beach, a man in a knitted cap prized at something with a hooked bar, swearing loudly when it slipped. "Mornin', sea witch," he called, cheerful in his contempt. She kept walking, allowing his words as a gull screamed overhead and drifted inland. Her eyes tracked the line where wet pebbles met the seaweed and the dark, pooled remnants of the tide. She stepped around a patch of shining rock, and then her body told her to stop. There was a girl a little nearer the water than most children were allowed to stand. She looked about 12 years old, and her cloak was too big. Her boots did not match either, and a knife hung at her hip, also appearing too large for her hand. She was observing the tide line with a calculating stare. "You'll lose your boots out there," she told the girl. The girl glanced down at her mismatched feet. "They were nearly lost when I got them." "Nearly lost isn't lost." The girl shrugged, impatient with the difference. "So long as I can still walk." She turned back to the shingle and resumed her work, letting her eyes skim the weed and the crevices between stones. The sea returned rope, timber, and iron when it was bored of keeping them. Bodies, too, sometimes, if the surf had chewed them enough. It did not return everything, though. It kept other things because it could. She saw a length of tarred rope, cut it free from a snag, and looped it over her shoulder. It was ordinary salvage, the kind of thing that made people think her useful despite their disdain. She moved again, continuing along through the detritus of the sea and hoping for treasure. What she saw next stopped her dead. Laying in a shallow cradle of weed and part buried in sand, a length of bone. It was pale, tapered and smooth. She knew immediately what she was looking at. One end was thickened into a shape with the rounded line of a candle's body. Around that grip, a mark had been precisely carved, and it was no simple rune. It was a sigil, a twist and loop with the appearance of a knot that might pull tighter if you stared too long. The shaft tapered away from the grip, but the taper did not look as if it had been carved. It looked grown, like a horn or tooth, but it was no remnant of a beast. This was a wand.
Behind her, the girl called out, "You found something?" She did not reach for it. Her hands hung by her sides as the tide lapped quietly a few feet away. Her mind travelled back to a night she had left far behind. A stormy night with rain like gravel and wind that screamed through the streets of Ironreach until the town cowered. She remembered running, clutching the wrapped weight to her chest and reaching the shore. The black water foamed, and the shock of its cold rose through her boots. She remembered the words she had spoken, imploring the sea to take what she could not carry any longer. Darken the waters and open the deep. Take my terrible secret to keep. Bury the burden beneath the white foam. Never allow it to find its way home. Grant me this bargain with salt and with raw. My debt will wash up on this desolate shore. A lifetime of freedom is all that I buy. When the tide demands forfeit, will I lay down to die. The sea had obliged and kept it, granting her the quiet she craved. That day it had returned the reminder, clean and pale. The girl stepped close enough to examine the carved mark. "It's so clean," she said, half disbelieving. The woman stammered, "Yes. Why is it so clean?"
The woman forced her creaking knees to crouch. She still did not touch it. She stared at the carved sigil, then closed her eyes and reached out to it. The grip was cold, but there was no response from it, and she breathed easy. Opening her eyes, she noticed the girl again, staring at her, puzzled. The woman wrapped the wand and hid it inside her coat, then gathered her rope and turned back toward the quay. The girl followed, uninvited, a few paces behind her. Ironreach did not greet them warmly. The harbour groaned, and masts crowded the docks as usual. They passed a fishmonger's stall, where a woman in a shawl glared at the salt wife's hooded shape and spat out the now customary slur. "Sea witch!" The woman did not stop or look back, but the girl remained fixed to her side, undaunted. In the lanes behind the quay, the lodging houses huddled together, sharing their warmth, and the salt wife halted at one of the shabbier establishments and climbed a narrow stair to her room. The girl followed up, quiet and persistent. At the door, the woman turned. "You don't come in." The girl frowned. "Why not?" "Because this isn't your place." "That's not a reason. That's you saying no." The woman tried to close the door, but the girl set her boot against it. For a moment, they stared at one another, each testing how far their refusal could go. The woman relented first and stepped back to grant the girl entry. The room was small and sparsely appointed, with damp in the corners, something few who lived in Ironreach could escape. The woman set the rope on the floor, unwound the cloth, and laid the bone wand on the bed. The girl stared at it without touching it. "It looks like a wand." "It's bone," the woman said. The girl stared at it without touching it. "It looks like a wand." "It's bone," the woman said. "All wands are bone, I heard," the girl said, and looked closer, fixing on the grip. "What's that sign?" "It's the sigil of the drowned knot." "Have you seen it before?" The woman sat on a stool, hands on her knees, and stared at the wand. It did not move, glow, or exhibit any signs of power. It waited, and the waiting felt worse than any magic spectacle would have been. The girl's voice went quieter. "Are you scared of it?" "No." The girl detected the lie, but did not expose it as another child might have. She questioned it, stubborn enough to want the truth. "Why did you take it?" The woman looked up, glowering, but the girl did not turn away. "Because leaving it doesn't make it gone," the woman said. The girl nodded, apparently satisfied. Then she asked unexpectedly, "What's your real name?" People in Ironreach never asked it. She was only given names that suited their mouths, and she left it at that. Her real name required the kind of regard she had long since stopped expecting. She considered lying. She had lied enough in her life to know which would keep you alive. Yet something in the girl's face reminded her of herself at that age, before storms and bargains, and the sea learning her weaknesses. "Zaria," she said, and the name sounded too grand for the crumpled bed, cracked jug, cold brazier, and damp of her surroundings. The girl repeated it. "Zaria." "Only once," Zaria said. "Not out there." The girl was solemn. "I won't." She looked back to the wand. "Where did it come from?" "From the sea." "No, before that." Zaria could not tell the story of the night she made her bargain. She could not say what she had carried to the shore and offered to the tide, because she could no longer bear it in her arms or in her mind. She could not say what she had asked for. She just needed quiet enough that she could keep living with herself. If she spoke the truth, it might live again and never be quiet. She stood abruptly. "Go home." The girl did not move. "Why are you sending me away now?" "Because you don't need to learn this kind of thing," Zaria said, and she meant it. The girl carried on. "I already know things. You think I don't? You think because I'm a child, I'm spared?" Zaria knew the girl was not telling lies. Ironreach did not spare children, and the sea did not spare anyone. She picked up the wand and held it close to her chest. "When something like this returns, it means the sea is finished with it." The girl frowned. "Finished?" "It kept it," Zaria continued. "It kept it quiet. And now it's done." The girl thought a moment. "And what does it want from you?" Zaria did not answer. She opened the door and stood aside. The girl hesitated and then stepped out before descending the stairs and disappearing into the lane. Zaria closed the door and leaned her forehead against it. In the stillness of her room, she heard the sea inside everything, with its steady insistence intruding into her life, as it had for years. She did not sleep. Before dawn, Zaria dressed without lighting the brazier, though the room was bitterly cold. She wrapped the bone wand and tucked it inside her coat. She took nothing else. Entering the lane as Ironreach began to stir, she walked toward the end of the breakwater. The town was not watching, or if it was, it did not care enough to speak. Halfway along the breakwater, she heard boots behind her, and did not need to turn to know who it was. The girl stood 10 paces back, hands buried in her pockets, cloak flapping in the wind. Evidently, she rarely took no for an answer. "I knew you'd go," she said. Zaria sighed. "Go home." The girl shook her head. "No, not yet." Zaria looked past her to the harbour, to the smoke, the masts and the dirty town that would keep working whatever happened that day, or any day. Indifference was a kind of mercy sometimes. It meant no one would stop her, but also that no one would pretend to mourn her. "You don't understand," Zaria said. She had nothing else. "I understand enough," the girl replied. "It's that bone thing. You're carrying it like it's made of iron." "Stay back," Zaria snapped. The girl stayed where she was. "Is it bad?" Zaria looked out to sea. The waves rolled and spray drifted under a pall of grey sky. "It's finished with me," she said. "What does that mean?" the girl asked. Zaria pulled the wand from inside her coat and unwrapped it. The bone looked almost luminous against the dead morning. The carved mark around the grip seemed to darken the light around it. "It doesn't look like it belongs here," the girl said. "It doesn't," Zaria replied. "Then why did the sea bring it to you?" Zaria's hands were trembling now. "Because I asked the sea to take something once, but I didn't know what I was doing. I was desperate. I wanted quiet. I wanted it gone." The girl stared at her, confused. "Gone where?" "Where the sea keeps what it keeps." "And now it's given it back?" asked the girl. "Yes." The girl partially realized the truth of it. "So it gets to decide." Zaria almost laughed. "It doesn't decide," she said. "It takes. We decide how close we stand." The girl inhaled abruptly. "You're not going in, Zaria?" Zaria looked at her. For a moment, she saw the child for what she was. Ironreach produced people like this, and the sea noticed them early. "You asked my name, and I gave it," Zaria said. "Never speak it again." Zaria turned back to the end of the breakwater, where the stones jutted into deeper water. The wind tugged at her hood, and spray chilled her cheeks. She held the wand out over the sea and felt a resistance in her hand. It was neither magic nor power. She had held this thing now, and what you held became, for a moment, your own. The resistance was hers. She lowered it into the water. A wave lapped against the bone, and down it went until the mark was submerged, and she released it. The sea took the wand back, drawing it down and carrying it away. Zaria stood with empty hands, and the relief was both immediate and unbearable. It made her hate herself and understand that this was not a choice she could walk away from. She dropped her cloak, her dress and her underclothes, and removed her boots, then stepped forward into the water. The cold struck her like a blade, climbing over her feet, her calves, and then her thighs. The tide tugged at her legs, but she kept moving, walking forward to a fate she had avoided for too long. Behind her, the girl's voice broke against the wind. "Zaria! Don't!" Zaria had no words left that could change anything. The town behind the breakwater was all smoke and iron and indifference. The sea in front of her was steady, patient, and endless. It did not rage or judge. It simply finished what was unfinished. A wave hit her chest and knocked her off balance, and her feet left the rocks. The water rolled her, heavy and cold, and she swallowed salt. Her arms flailed once, instinctively, then slowed as the cold sank into her bones and movement became a distant memory. For a moment, the world was dark and roaring. Then the pressure changed, and the pull became certain. Panic tried to rise and found nowhere to take hold, because Zaria had lived with the sea inside her for years, and now it was simply taking up the whole space. Finished, she thought, and let the sea take her, while the girl watched helplessly, trying to make sense of all she had witnessed. Ironreach woke to grey light, noise, and work. Men went to the docks, apprentices fed furnaces, and the harbour shivered. No bell was rung, and no door was knocked for Zaria. No prayers were said for the sea witch. In a town full of absences from debt and tide, one more would make no difference. When the tide went out again, the sea deposited its salty haul on the pebbles as normal, and a girl waited. She was the first to find it, and stood over it for a long time. It looked the same, the grip carved carefully, and the strange mark intact. The girl did not touch it, bend down, or take it. She only looked until its shape was burned into her mind, like a lesson she would never unlearn. Then she turned and walked back toward the town, making her way to the stair at the boarding house. On the first step, she placed a flower and a note with one word, Zaria, and she disappeared into the noise of Ironreach, never to speak it again.
Debts ignored do not expire, and in the marchlands, when they are finally called in, they are collected by forces that never forgot. The moral is simple and unforgiving. You may choose when you borrow peace, but you never choose when payment comes due.